have a friend, let's call her Sarah, who has a kitchen drawer that doesn't open all the way. It's been stuck for 3 years. If you tug on it, it moves about 2 inches, and then thud. Something inside is wedged. Something small, probably a wooden spoon or a stray whisk, has jammed itself against the frame. Most people would just empty the drawer above it, reach back and fix it. But Sarah? She just learned to live with it. She knows exactly which 2 fingers to slide into that tiny gap to fish out a vegetable peeler. She told me once, "Ebby, I've forgotten what's even in the back of that drawer. It's just part of the house now, the drawer that doesn't open." We laughed about it, but then I saw her face when her sister's name came up in conversation. It was the exact same look, a sudden, subtle tightening, a door that used to swing wide, now jammed shut by something small, hard, and wedged deep in the dark. She hasn't spoken to her sister since 2021. And the weirdest part? She can't quite remember the specific sentence that started the fire. She just remembers the heat. And now, the cold. We talk about grudges like they're trophies. We carry them around like a badge of self-respect. We tell ourselves, I have boundaries. I don't let people treat me like that. We mistake the weight for strength. We think that by staying angry, we're holding the other person accountable, like our resentment is a private prison where they're doing time. But have you ever looked at the prisoner in that scenario? Usually they're out at dinner. They're sleeping soundly. They might not even know they're locked up. Meanwhile, you're the one pulling the double shift as the prison guard. You're the one pacing the floor at 2 a.m., rehearsing the speech you'll never give. You're the one whose blood pressure spikes when a certain car drives past. We've rebranded unforgiveness as remembering the lesson. We tell ourselves it's a shield, but a shield is something you lift when an arrow is flying. A grudge is something you strap to your chest and wear to bed. It's not justice, it's not accountability, it's just heavy. And the most dangerous thing about a grudge isn't that it hurts the other person, it's that it starts to reshape the person holding it. You start to see the whole world through the lens of that one betrayal. You stop looking for friends and start looking for red flags. You don't realize that the walls you built to keep them out are slowly becoming the walls of your own tomb.
Think about Joseph. Not the Technicolor Dreamcoat version, but the man sitting in an Egyptian prison. His brothers didn't just hurt his feelings, they trafficked him. They took his youth, his father, his identity, and they left him for dead in a hole in the dirt. If anyone had a right to a grudge, it was Joseph. I imagine Joseph in those middle years. Every time he saw a nomadic trader, every time he heard a Hebrew accent, that drawer in his heart must have jammed. He probably spent 1,000 nights imagining his brothers' faces. He probably scripted a version of the story where he comes back in power and watches them beg. And then, it actually happens. Years later, there's a famine. His brothers show up in Egypt, hungry and desperate. They don't recognize him. He's the prime minister now. He has the power to do whatever he wants. He could have them executed with a flick of his wrist. That would be justice, right? But there's a moment in the text that kills me every time. Joseph sees them, and he has to leave the room because he starts to weep. He doesn't weep because he's over it. He weeps because the weight of holding that story for 20 years just became unbearable. See, Joseph realized something we often miss. If he punished them, he'd be tied to them forever. He'd be a man defined by his brother's sin. But when he finally reveals himself, he says something radical. He says, "Don't be distressed or angry with yourselves. It was God who sent me ahead of you." He didn't excuse them. He just refused to let their evil be the main character of his life anymore. But let's bring it down to something a bit more Tuesday morning. I knew a guy once who stopped talking to his best man over a $200 debt. $200. They were friends for 15 years. The debt was never paid, and the silence grew. 10 years later, the best man passed away suddenly. My friend went to the funeral, and he told me later, "Ebby, I sat in the back of that church, and all I could think about was that I spent a decade being right. I was 100% right. He owed me that money. But sitting there, looking at that casket, I realized I traded 10 years of brotherhood for the satisfaction of being correct about $200.
He said the grudge felt like armor when he was 30, but at 40, it just felt like a pile of scrap metal he'd been dragging through the mud.
We play these mental movies on loop. We replay the betrayal. We pause it at the part where they lied. We zoom in on the smirk they gave us. We do this because we think that if we analyze the pain enough, we'll eventually control it. But you can't analyze a fire into going out. You just have to stop feeding it wood. Here's the thing we don't want to admit. Unforgiveness is emotional labor with no salary. Every morning you wake up and decide to keep that grudge alive, you are clocking into a job that pays you in bitterness. You are using your creative energy, the energy you could be using to build a business, love your kids, or write a song, and you are spending it on maintaining a monument to someone who isn't even there. Insight number 1. Grudges punish the holder more consistently than the offender. You are the one carrying the acid. The container always corrodes before the target. Insight number 2. You don't move on from a grudge, you carry it forward. If you don't deal with the resentment you have for your father, you will eventually find yourself projecting his face onto your boss, your spouse, or your God. A grudge isn't a stationary object. It's a filter that changes the color of everything you see. And finally, forgiveness isn't about the other person's apology. It's about your oxygen. If you wait for them to say, "I'm sorry," before you let go, you have given them the remote control to your peace of mind. And some people, they'll die with that remote in their pocket. Are you really going to let them design when you get to breathe again? So what does it look like to actually set it down? It's not a dramatic cinematic moment where you hug and cry and the music swells. Usually it's much quieter. It's a decision to stop checking their social media to see if they're suffering enough. It's the decision to stop telling the story of what they did to you to every new person you meet. It feels unfair. Let's be honest. Letting go feels like you're letting them get away with it. But empathy, the kind of empathy we talk about here at Take Me to Church, isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's about looking at your own hands and realizing they weren't meant to hold stones. It's about realizing that you are also a person in need of a massive amount of grace, and your grip is getting tired.
You don't need their apology to be free. You just need to realize that the justice you're holding out for isn't worth the cost of your soul's rest. I want you to think about Jesus for a second. Think about the night he was arrested. He's in the garden, and Peter, his right-hand man, falls asleep when Jesus is sweating blood. Then, a few hours later, Peter denies he even knows him, not once, but 3 times. Jesus is being beaten, mocked, and killed, and his best friend is standing by a fire saying, "I don't know the man." When Jesus rises from the dead, he goes back to the beach. He finds Peter. He doesn't bring a bill. He doesn't ask for an itemized apology. He doesn't say, "Do you have any idea how much that hurt?" He just asks, "Do you love me?" He cooks him breakfast. He offers him a way back. Jesus handled betrayal by refusing to let it turn him into a victim. He stayed the author of his own story. Maybe today, the most spiritual thing you can do isn't to win the argument. Maybe it's just to open that jammed drawer in your heart. Look at that old, dusty grudge and say, "You can go now. I need the space for something better." Take a breath. Set it down. It's been a long walk, and you've carried it far enough. I'm E.B. This is Take Me to Church. I'll talk to you next time.